Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Tacoma Cyclist. I am the Tacoma Cyclist, and with me as always is my sidekick, the Boogeyman. Today we're going to be reviewing this. Zwift. Just Zwift. A nice training application that's been out for a little over a year now, mostly in beta, but recently released as a subscription service to the general public. We've been riding Zwift a lot for the past several months, both as beta users and now as full subscription members. And we've really enjoyed using it. We've been riding for the most part indoors for the past several months. It's been kind of cold and wet, even more so than normal in the Pacific Northwest. So it's really not been great to get out on the roads unless you just really want to ride in 30-degree weather that's freezing and there's ice on the ground. So we've really had the opportunity to put Zwift through its paces, and we've also had the opportunity to compare it to other services like BKool and Trainer Road. In this review, we're going to talk a little bit about how we think about Zwift, what are the positives, some of the negatives. There are some negatives with Zwift that have been kind of driving us nuts, and compare that also to BKool and Trainer Road as overall services for training. So let's take a look at how it actually works in action. This is your startup screen for Zwift. After you've logged in, which yes, you have to log in every time you start your Zwift session. After you've logged in, it's going to take you here. Now, before we get going here, there are a few things that you actually need before riding in Zwift. You need a trainer. We've got one here. We're using our trusty Tacoma Smart Trainer. You're going to need a bike. You're going to need a bottle and a towel. And you're going to need a rider. Once you get everything in place, you're going to need to set up a couple things. And for that, you're going to need probably the most critical thing that you don't necessarily already have laying around the house, which is an Ant Plus dongle. You can get those from Amazon, you can get them from Competitive Cyclist, or even your local bike shop sometimes. We use the ones from Suunto, but you can also get one from Garmin as well. In our case, we've also got a 10-foot extension cable for USB, which drags the cable a little away from the computer, away from your Wi-Fi card, which also does cause some interruptions, and puts it closer to your trainer and your other sensors. An Ant Plus sensor for speed and for cadence is very helpful. A power meter is awesome, but a powered trainer, such as the Tacoma Smart Trainer, is going to have your power sensor and your cadence sensor built in. The program derives speed based on your power, so don't worry too much about the speed sensor. If you've got a heart rate sensor, this would also be the place where you're going to go ahead and sync that. And all you do is you click the search buttons. If you've already synced a device to it before, those things should pop up automatically. Now I say should, and this is one of the things that frustrates me about Zwift. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And that's kind of annoying. When you expect it to work and you've already gotten on the bike and already clicked in, sometimes it's nice just to be able to start pedaling and get going. It's annoying to have to get down and click search again and have to look for other things. So bear in mind, it should find it again. Sometimes you have to click search. And in this case, I'm going to have to do just that to find the cadence sensor. So bear with me 1 second and then we'll start riding. Once you've logged in and you've synced all of your sensors to the system, you're presented with this screen here where you have a few choices to make. The top section gives you the option to choose some workouts, and the bottom section just gives you the option to just ride. You can also choose a rider from the list here to start with. So if you want to ride with folks that are on your team, somebody that you recognize, maybe you recognize somebody from across town that you typically ride with, they might be in here and you can scroll through and say, start riding with this person, and it'll drop you in right with them. In fact, just a few minutes ago, the Boogeyman was riding with Mark Renshaw. Ultimately, Mark Renshaw may have had a hard time keeping up with the Boogeyman, and I think he dropped out. It happens. So in this particular case, we're going to go ahead and jump right into a ride. We're just going to go ahead and click the ride button, which might be obscured by the Boogeyman's head, but it's right here at the bottom. And since he's already been pedaling a little bit, you're going to see he's already started up. In the top left-hand corner, you're going to see your basic wattage. That wattage tells us, well, how much wattage is being received at the head unit here. It also has a cadence meter up there, and if you happen to have a heart rate sensor synced, it will also sync your heart rate as well, and it'll tell you that bit of information. In the center, it's going to give you your speed, distance traveled, amount of elevation gain, and the time you've ridden. The orange bar across the bottom tells us when you're going to get your next prize, and that's one of the nice things about Zwift, is it kind of incentivizes it and makes it into a game. So as you ride, as you rack up miles, as you do certain sprint points, you gain points, and those points take you to the next level. And with each level, you get additional prizes. Maybe it's a new bike, maybe it's new wheels, new kit, any number of things. You can get those by moving from level to level to level. that's kind of a nice way of making this more fun and more of a game instead of just constantly spending hours on the trainer. On the right-hand side here, we see we've got the leaderboards, and we have the overall terrain course mapped out, which tells us where he is in the course of this entire layout. Zwift has right now just a few different options for courses. You've got Watopia Island, and you've got the Richmond UCI course, and they've added a couple little twists and turns here recently. One thing I'd like to see is more courses from Zwift. The nice thing about BKool over Zwift is that you have tons of courses to choose from. Some of them actually have 3D rendering like this, some of them are just overlays on top of Google Maps. But in any case, you have tons, hundreds or even thousands of choices. Zwift, you have a couple, and really, in most cases, you don't even have a choice. It just tells you which one you're going to ride. So, something to take note. We would really like to see some different things here, but I do understand that it takes a lot to program those in, and the Zwift programming team is working on developing more things. We now have a segment that's appeared on the board, and this is a KOM segment. There's a couple of these, sometimes one or two on every course, and in this case, this is for a climb. We have KOM sections, we have sprint sections, and we have overall course leaderboards. So the Boogeyman's approaching a KOM leaderboard here, and he's going to do his best to put out a little bit of extra power to get up this hill. The nice thing about this is that the way that Zwift transitions from flat ground to hills is very realistic. Unlike some of the other systems out there, for example with BKool, as you hit a hill, a lot of times what happens is you go from a 0% to an 8%. You don't have that ramp up that normally occurs in most real life situations. With Zwift, transitioning from a 0% up to an 8% is actually pretty realistic. Now, these guys that Boogeyman's behind right now are ghosts. They're not real riders. You can draft behind them, but I think that the Boogeyman's about to put down some real power and try to get past as many people as he can, especially going up this little incline. Let's see what you got there, kiddo. So at the moment he's putting out about 4.5 watts per kilogram, and that really does translate to speed on this system. Even going up hills, they do a pretty good job overall of converting your power to actual speed. So now what we're looking at here is something that actually kind of frustrates me a great deal about Zwift, and that is the use of their Z-Power system. Now, in all fairness to Zwift, what they're trying to do with Z-Power is make it so that everybody, not just folks that have power meters or power trainers that are pretty expensive, but that everybody can use Zwift. And in this particular case, we've got a guy who has a 207 on this climb. Now 207 is not impossible on this climb. I've seen people do it, but the person that has this KOM at the moment doesn't have any power meter, doesn't have any way of actually measuring his true output power. What I've seen a lot of times is folks game this system, whether they do it intentionally or whether they do it on accident. They game the system. They put in their weight too low, or something is misconfigured within their trainer, and it shows them putting out a lot more power than they really can. So I've seen some folks on here that are some serious hardcore riders get beaten by a half a minute or more by folks that you've never heard of before that don't have any power meter on their system. And it just kind of makes you wonder. It's a little bit frustrating. There's been a lot of conversation on the internet about whether or not people should have a separate leaderboard for folks with Z-Power or with power. I, for one, am for it, but I know there's a lot of people that are against it. They say it's kind of exclusionary. Well, until we can guarantee that everybody sets up their system correctly, I think what we're going to have is this frustration. The key is, don't get too bent out of shape. This isn't a real race. Nobody's actually winning. So don't get too upset if somebody beats your KOM time by 1.5 minutes and you think there's no way possible. There might not be a way possible. Or you might just have somebody on the course that really knows how to ride. So take it for what it's worth. It's just a game. Have fun with it. Bury yourself if you want to, or just ride leisurely if you want to. And it really gives you that option. So I'm going to jump here and show you how this works. As he's approaching the finish line of this KOM, this banner, it's going to tell him what his place was in comparison to the next rider behind him. So in this particular case, he actually did pretty well. 3 minutes and 51 seconds up that climb, which is no small feat. He did really well. He averaged about 4 watts per kilogram up that climb overall. We're back now at the options screen. Now this actually kind of hints at one of the other things that frustrates us about Zwift. When you finish your previous ride, the ride that Boogeyman just did, you have to hit end ride. At that point you can discard the ride, maybe you're not satisfied with what you did, or you can save the ride, and if you have it synced to your Strava account, it'll automatically upload. In fact, it automatically, very quickly uploads. But once you do that, it closes the program. Now something that's kind of frustrating about that is maybe you don't want to just quit riding. Maybe you want to get off the bike, and maybe you want to go do a workout like we're about to do. We just went from a ride to a workout. Maybe you want to use a ride as a warm-up. Maybe you want to use a workout and then go into a ride. You can't do that. You have to actually shut the system down, re-log in, and restart. It's kind of a pain in the butt, I'll be honest. It's something that people have brought up many times with the Zwift developers, and they've never addressed it. So honestly, I'd really like to know why it is you have to log back in every single time you do this. You should be able to switch between ride types, no problem. You can't. But we've already gone through the process of shutting it down, re-logging back in, and now we're back at the options screen. So if you go up to the top of the options screen here, you're going to see training options available to you. And you can go and select workout, which I'm going to do just now. Looking at the workout screen that we've got here, there are a few that are pre-programmed into the system. And the ones that are pre-programmed are actually pretty good. You've got some relatively short interval sessions that are available here. You've got some longer ones, and then you have some training sessions that are available to do things like get you ready for a time trial, or maybe do your FTP test. The one thing that does kind of drive me nuts about this is there really aren't any short sessions. If you wanted to get in a 15 to 20 minute interval session, not going to happen. The shortest you're going to get is that one 30-minute session, and everything else is about 45 minutes to an hour or longer. That's not that big of a deal, except sometimes maybe first thing in the morning you just want to put 15, 20 minutes on the bike. Maybe do a 5-minute warm-up, 10-minute interval session, hop in the shower, and then go to work. There aren't any sessions like that, unless you just cut one of these short. And then I feel like you're kind of getting shortchanged with what's available. It'd be nice to have those. Now, of course, you can go in and create your own interval session, and that works great. It's a little bit clunky because you've got to click and drag all these blocks and boxes all the way around to make sure you've got it at the right amount of power for the right amount of time. It's a little bit clunky. What I'd really like to see is a way to import something from like an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV style file that you can bring into the system with your wattage in one column, the amount of time in the next column. That's not available. So instead, you got to program your own in. If you program in one session, it'll take you 5 to 10 minutes. You program in a few more. It gets kind of tiring. It'd be nice just to be able to have that Excel spreadsheet and just shoot it right in there. Or even have that functionality just built right in. You just punch in your numbers and go. Instead, you got to click around and poke around. It's kind of annoying. That being said, though, it is available for you to put those in, and it is a nice feature. Overall, it's a pretty good setup. Now, on the bottom box here, you can see it says Use Erg Mode. Ours is unchecked, and I really like it that way. In Erg Mode, the trainer is actually controlled by Zwift overall. It sends the power to the head unit, which is fine, except for the fact that you're going to pretty much stay in the same gear the whole time. So if you're in your little ring, big cog, you're going to stay in your little ring, big cog. There's not a whole lot of changing up and down to meet the power that it's telling you, because it's controlling the head unit and saying, hey, 350 watts, we're going to give you 350 watts worth of resistance. With Erg Mode, it gives you the option to shift your gears. To me, that feels a lot more natural. If the computer says, go 350 watts, fine. I'm going to get into the appropriate gearing to go 350 watts. Instead of you telling me, or the bike telling me, how hard to pedal based on the number that's on the screen. I just think it works out a lot better that way. And it seems to me to be a lot more realistic. So my recommendation is to keep that Erg Mode unchecked. Now the cool thing about this setup also is that all of these workouts are based entirely off of your FTP. Now it starts out with a basic calculation assuming you're around a 200 watt FTP, and you can go in and punch in your own number all you want, but you can also do an FTP test, at which point it programs your FTP in and bases all of those intervals off of that. Now, one other thing that kind of drives me nuts about this system is how it calculates your FTP. Both the Boogeyman and I have found that the FTP that Zwift comes up with is actually lower than the real world FTP. Part of the reason for that, one of the biggest reasons for that, is as you're out riding and doing your FTP test, it allows you to draft. That's frustrating. You're pulling up behind somebody going 300 watts, all of a sudden the on-screen wattage and the record of your wattage drops because you're now in the draft of somebody. Well, I didn't stop pedaling. I didn't start putting out that much. I didn't drop my power output, but Zwift thinks I did. So what I found is if there's a lot of people out on the day that you're doing your FTP test, your FTP is going to be lower. So if you want, you can manually input your own FTP, or you can figure it out yourself and punch it in there. I just genuinely don't like the FTP test available on Zwift. That being said, we're going to go ahead and start off with this. We're going to do what's called John's short mix here, which is a 30-minute segment. And we're going to do a few of those segments. We're not going to do the whole 30-minute session. But to do that, I need to have a kid on a bike again. Okay, we've started off John's short mix. And the nice thing about these programs is it really does start you off with a good warm-up. The idea is just to get you ramped up to what it wants to see you start doing as intervals, and again, it's based entirely off of your FTP. The bad thing is that I think that a lot of times the warm-ups are a little bit too low. In fact, it's asking him to ride at 40 watts right now. He's in his little ring, lowest possible gear, and he can barely sustain as low as 40 watts. And that's putting out a cadence of, well, next to nothing. I think he's spinning about 50 for some reason. Once again, has decided to not read his cadence sensor. So he's doing 60 watts, which is about as low as he can possibly go, but it wants him to go lower. I found I had the same problem when I'm on this and it's telling me to do my warm-up and it's saying do 120 watts. I can't do 120 watts, so I automatically failed this segment. A little bit frustrating. The Boogeyman is now about to finish his first warm-up session here, which is going to then take him into his first set of intervals. What you're going to see as he approaches and he comes around the bend of this turn is there's going to be an archway. It's going to be a glowing arch, and it's going to be, oh, there we go, it's right there on the screen. That glowing arch is going to tell him when he can actually have to kick in for his next set of intervals. And he's even got a little notifier on the screen that says intervals coming. Nice little touches. It kind of gets your mind ready for the next step there. And as he approaches that, he's going to go ahead and start getting into the gears necessary to put out the power I've been asking for. It will tell you if you're not putting out enough power or if you're putting out too much power. So in this case, it's asking him to put out 175 watts. And for somebody like him that weighs 35 kilograms, it says it's 3-point-some kilograms, watts per kilogram, but it's closer to 4. So he's going to put out that kind of wattage for a little while here, for about a minute, and then it's going to bring him back down into a warm-up, or back into a cool-down section, or rest section again. Pretty much like a traditional interval session here. He's approaching the first blue banner, which is his first rest period here. He'll have about 30 seconds to rest in this particular interval session. It's going to ask him to reduce his power, and he needs to keep it there. If he's successful in keeping within the range that they recommend, it's going to give him a star and say that he was successfully completing this. If he doesn't stay within the range, it's going to say he actually failed it, which is kind of demoralizing. But I get it, and the idea here is to incentivize doing well. And that's what this thing does pretty well. It actually encourages you to keep that wattage, not overshoot it, not undershoot it, but really do your best to keep within a certain range of that wattage. So here we go, we're back up to another session with a little bit more power. These aren't necessarily easy, I'll tell you that. Okay, the Boogeyman is finishing up his first warm-down session and is now heading into his first sprint. He's going to have to put out 10 watts per kilogram to succeed on this. You can do it. Not bad. He got pretty close to that 350. And in truth, we actually have shot this a couple times because we had some video problems before. So he's a little bit on the tired side right now. But overall, a 10 watt per kilogram sprint for a 10-year-old kid, not too bad at all. So the nice thing about this again is it's going to incentivize him. It gave him a star for that because he got pretty darn close, and that's the idea. It wants you to get pretty close to those numbers. It wants you to stay pretty close to those numbers. So overall, the interval sessions on this are pretty good. Yes, you have a limited set of intervals to work with, but you can make your own. You maybe not have as many as you would with Trainer Road, but you certainly have the option, and there are a couple decent ones already pre-built in. So I'm going to let him warm down for a little bit, and we'll come back and talk about a few more things. After a really hard ride, I think the kid deserves a little bit of his favorite beverage, some recovery root beer. It might sound like, based on some of the negative comments we've had throughout this video, that maybe we don't like Zwift. But that really couldn't be farther from the truth. We really do like Zwift. It's a very cool application, and it does a lot of things very well. There are some things that we wish we would see improve, and based on some of the things we've seen so far, it appears that the developers are listening. It is a little slow to improve. We are seeing things take a long time, and there are some things that a lot of people have asked for that haven't been done. We'd like to see some of those fixed. But again, we have to stress, we really like this application. It makes riding on the trainer fun. There are a lot of cool features. The ability to have those intervals built into there without having to program your own. Sure, we'd like to see more selections available, but right now, there's a few that are pretty good. So overall, we really like this application. Comparing it to Trainer Road, it's not as good as far as intervals and workouts that are available. Comparing it to BKool, it's definitely better than the 3D world experience that BKool offers. So it sits kind of in that happy medium range for all of the applications. It does 3D rendering well. It does the course well. It gives you an opportunity to incentivize riding through those increases and those bonuses and those gifts that you get through your settings, where you can change the color of your bike and the style of bike and everything. So overall, it's a really cool application. Wholeheartedly, we dig it. It's getting us ready for race season. It gives us the opportunity to sit in a nice, controlled environment and ride when the weather outside is nasty. So at the end of the day, I think we can wholeheartedly agree, Zwift, it's one cool application. Thanks for joining us, and don't forget to click subscribe.